Over the past month, President Donald Trump's administration has introduced a series of aggressive trade policies and provocative statements that have notably escalated tensions with both Canada and the European Union. Multiple international trade experts, including analysts from the World Trade Organization and the Peterson Institute for International Economics, have warned that such measures could undermine long-standing economic partnerships. As direct consequence, Canada and the European Union have signaled a resolve to reinforce their ties, diversify their respective trade portfolios, and present a unified front against US protectionism. Beyond trade, defense and security issues have also become a focal point for European leaders as they adjust to shifting US policies under the Trump administration. France has announced a second high-level meeting on Wednesday to discuss security and defense strategies concerning Ukraine, building on an emergency gathering previously organized by President Emmanuel Macron. This time, the list of invited participants extends beyond Europe's largest powers to include Norway, Canada, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, the Czech Republic, Greece, Finland, Romania, Sweden, and Belgium. Officials familiar with the planning indicate that the meeting's hybrid format, enabling both in-person and virtual attendance, aims to ensure maximum participation. France's broader objective appears to be forging a more unified European position, especially given increasing concerns about US reliability and potential back-channel negotiations with Russia. Canada and the United States share one of the most extensive and mutually beneficial economic relationships in the world. By many estimates, their two-way trade in goods and services approaches or exceeds $800 billion annually, translating into roughly $22 billion crossing the border every single day, according to data compiled by both the Office of the United States Trade Representative, USTR, and Global Affairs Canada. This massive bilateral exchange spans key sectors like automotive manufacturing, agricultural products, technology, services, and, crucially, energy. Yet amid rising talk of imposing tariffs on Canadian exports, many experts warn that such actions risk severe repercussions, not only for Canada, but also for the United States. A primary concern is America's significant reliance on Canadian energy imports, particularly oil and electricity. Canada is the largest foreign supplier of crude oil to the United States, far surpassing other major exporters such as Saudi Arabia and Mexico. By some estimates from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, Canada has consistently accounted for more than half of all U.S. crude oil imports in recent years. Much of this supply is delivered through extensive cross-border pipeline networks, such as the Keystone System, that feed refineries in the Midwest and along the Gulf Coast. Any disruptions due to tariffs or retaliatory measures could lead to price spikes at the pump and strain supply chains for downstream petrochemical products. While Canada's electricity exports to the United States represent a modest share of total American consumption on a national scale, certain northern states rely heavily on Canadian power. Provinces like Quebec, Manitoba, and British Columbia send hydroelectricity across the border, providing a stable, low-cost energy supply to states in the Northeast, Upper Midwest, and Pacific Northwest during peak demand seasons. Most notably, in winter and summer, this imported Canadian electricity helps many US regions avoid shortages and reduce reliance on more expensive or higher emission power sources. If tariffs escalate into broader trade retaliation, these flows could be curtailed or become more expensive, straining local grids and driving up consumer utility bills. The broader interdependence of the two economies amplifies the impact of any tariffs. Automotive parts, for instance, often crisscross the border multiple times before final assembly, meaning tariffs on components could inflate costs for American automakers and ultimately for consumers. Similar dynamics exist in agriculture, where fruits, vegetables, and livestock frequently move both north and south, ensuring stable food prices and helping farmers in each country manage seasonal fluctuations. Should the US impose tariffs on Canadian energy or other sectors, Canada has historically shown that it will respond with proportional measures of its own. This can trigger a cycle of escalating duties that hamper essential imports on both sides. Experts at institutions like the Peterson Institute for International Economics and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce caution that such tit-for-tat retaliation could cause extensive supply chain disruptions. Job losses and cost of living increases occur in both countries, precisely the opposite of what either government aims to achieve. Geopolitical and investor confidence, energy security, and political stability often go hand in hand. If cross-border cooperation on oil and electricity is compromised, it could unsettle markets and cause both foreign and domestic investors to rethink projects that rely on predictable trade terms. Business leaders emphasize that reliable infrastructure, consistent regulations, and minimal tariffs underpin the close economic ties between the United States and Canada. Undermining these advantages risk creating long-term uncertainty about new investments in pipelines, manufacturing plants, and other job-creating ventures. While the prospect of tariffs might be framed as a tool for protecting domestic industries, the reality is far more complex. The sheer scale of US-Canada trade and the strategic importance of Canadian energy to the American market mean that any significant disruption could provoke serious economic consequences for the United States itself. Experts overwhelmingly agree that a balanced collaborative approach to resolving trade disagreements benefits both countries, ensuring continued growth, stable energy supplies, and robust consumer markets on both sides of the border. Both Canada and the EU have prioritized closer economic cooperation to reduce reliance on the US market and maintain a rules-based international trading system. This strategy has taken on heightened importance since the United States imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, actions that economists at the International Monetary Fund argue could trigger retaliatory moves and broader disruptions to global trade flows. Tiwa. Key legal and structural framework supporting these closer ties is the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, provisionally in force since 2017. CETA is designed to eliminate tariffs on nearly 98% of goods and services traded between Canada and the EU. According to the European Commission's most recent data, bilateral trade between the two partners has risen by approximately 65% since CETA's provisional application. In addition to boosting trade in goods, the agreement also streamlines the mutual recognition of professional qualifications in fields such as engineering and architecture. Officials on both sides, Canadian ministers in Ottawa and EU trade representatives in Brussels, emphasize the importance of fully exploiting CETA's benefits. They highlight the need to ensure that small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, can navigate the complexities of transatlantic commerce. Business support organizations, such as the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and Eurochambre, have published guides and offer training programs aimed at helping SMEs export more effectively under CETA. Given that the United States accounts for nearly 75% of Canada's export market, Canadian policymakers are working to lessen economic exposure to US trade fluctuations. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government has set an ambitious goal to increase non-US exports by 50% by 2025. To that end, Canada has pursued new trade deals with countries like Indonesia and Ecuador, expanding its foothold in emerging markets across Asia and Latin America. Economists at the Royal Bank of Canada note that diversifying trade partners could offer Canadian exporters a buffer against potential tariffs or policy shifts in Washington. Likewise, European commissioners see CETA as part of a broader EU plan to diversify its own external trade links, complementing existing or pending agreements with partners like Japan, Vietnam, and other nations. Another pivotal component of this deepening partnership is the joint development of secure supply chains for critical minerals. Lithium, cobalt, nickel, and other rare earth elements are essential for modern battery production and green energy technologies. Both Canada and the EU have signaled a shared interest in reducing dependence on suppliers such as China for these strategic minerals. Agencies like Natural Resources Canada and the European Battery Alliance are assessing collaborative ventures in mining, processing, and recycling of critical minerals. This could involve joint research initiatives, co-financing of mining projects, and agreements to facilitate technology transfers. Parallel discussions also focus on energy security, including prospective infrastructure that would allow Canadian oil and gas exports to reach European refineries more efficiently. The International Energy Agency points out that Europe's ongoing efforts to transition away from Russian gas supplies elevate the importance of stable partnerships in North America and elsewhere in response to US tariffs on steel, aluminum, and other products. The EU has adopted a coordinated approach. Both sides have condemned the measures as inconsistent with established global trade rules. Their official statements underscore a commitment to upholding a transparent, rules-based order under the WTO. While the precise nature of their retaliatory steps remains under discussion, trade officials suggest they may levy proportionate counter-tariffs or seek formal dispute resolution through the WTO's mechanisms. From the perspective of global economic governance, this alignment signals that long-standing allies are prepared to push back against unilateral US policies they view as destabilizing. Experts at the Brookings Institution observed that joint action by Canada and the EU could compel Washington to re-evaluate its trade strategy, especially if it faces significant blowback from multiple major economies simultaneously. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke nationally in response to President Donald Trump's announcement of a 25% tariff on Canadian exports. In a forceful condemnation, Trudeau labelled the tariffs as totally unjustified and a direct violation of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. Trade analysts at organizations like the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and the Peterson Institute for International Economics warned that such tariffs not only strain bilateral ties, but also disrupt North American supply chains, critical to sectors like automotive and agriculture. Trudeau stressed that these tariffs would harm both Canadians and Americans, pointing out how interwoven the two economies are, especially in manufacturing and energy. He announced that Canada would impose counter-tariffs of equivalent value on select US goods, urging Canadians to support domestic products in response. Citing past trade disputes, Trudeau stated that retaliatory measures are unfortunate, but necessary to defend national interests. He concluded, "This is a choice that, yes, will harm Canadians, but beyond that, it will have real consequences for you, the American people." During a private event, reporters from Reuters and other outlets captured audio of Trudeau referencing President Trump's suggestions about Canada becoming the 51st US state. According to Trudeau, these comments are a real issue and connected to Canada's abundant natural resources, such as timber, oil, and critical minerals. International relations experts at think tanks like the Wilson Center remarked that informal annexation rhetoric has occasionally surfaced in Canadian-American discourse, often as political bluster. However, Trudeau's recognition that President Trump might seriously entertain the idea has raised concerns over sovereignty and resource control. The Prime Minister's comments underscore the gravity of the situation, signaling that even half-serious proposals can impact diplomatic relations. Speaking in Brussels at a joint press conference with European Commission leaders, Prime Minister Trudeau warned that the new US tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum would harm job growth, not only in Canada, but also in the United States. He drew parallels with the 2018 tariffs, which he claims led to approximately 75,000 American job losses, according to studies by the US Congressional Budget Office and various Canadian economic institutes. To underscore the potential fallout, Trudeau highlighted that industries on both sides of the border are deeply interdependent. Everything from car parts to raw materials crosses the border multiple times before final assembly. He reiterated that Canada would consider proportionate countermeasures if these tariffs were fully enacted, noting the importance of standing firm to protect Canadian workers. At the Invictus Games in Vancouver, Prime Minister Trudeau shifted his tone to one of solidarity and camaraderie. In a speech honouring the participating athletes, wounded, injured, and sick service personnel, he emphasized the strong friendship that exists between Canada and the United States. Despite the current diplomatic tensions, Trudeau spotlighted the athletes' resilience and highlighted how their accomplishments could inspire other veterans worldwide. He also acknowledged the shared history and close cultural ties that bind Canadians and Americans together, noting that political disputes should not overshadow the deep personal connections and mutual respect. His tribute at the Invictus Games served as a reminder of the core values and collaborative spirit that Canadians and Americans uphold.